Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine Quijano. It's good to be with you. Thanks for joining us. Tuesday marks day one of the second impeachment trial of former President Donald Trump. After 4 hours of debate, senators voted to affirm what they laid out before the proceedings, that it is constitutional to be holding a trial for a president no longer in the White House. Within that vote lies a key indicator for the likely outcome of this trial. 44 Republicans voted to call the process unconstitutional, leading to the belief Democrats will likely not get the 17 Republican votes they need for a conviction. One Republican, Louisiana Senator Bill Cassidy, flipped his vote to join 5 other GOP senators who had previously broken party lines and voted in favor of holding the trial. Here's how he described his reasoning for the change.
I said I'd be an impartial juror. Anyone listening to those arguments, the House managers were focused, they were organized, they relied upon both precedent, the Constitution, and legal scholars. They made a compelling argument. President Trump's team were disorganized. They did everything they could but to talk about the question at hand. And when they talked about it, they kind of glided over it, almost as if they were embarrassed of their arguments. Now, if I'm an impartial juror, and one side's doing a great job, and the other side's doing a terrible job on the issue at hand, as an impartial juror, I'm going to vote for the side that did the good job.
As a reminder, the House charged Mr. Trump with 1 count of incitement of insurrection. The impeachment article cites his repeatedly false statements that the presidential election results should not be accepted by the country, and alleges he encouraged the rioters that descended on the Capitol last month. Here's a sample of the arguments made in the Senate on day one.
The transition of power is always the most dangerous moment for democracies. Every historian will tell you that. We just saw it in the most astonishing way. We lived through it.
This trial is not about trading liberty for security. It's about suggesting that it is a good idea that we give up those liberties that we have so long fought for. Let's understand why we are really here. We are really here because the majority in the House of Representatives does not want to face Donald Trump as a political rival in the future.
Impeachment exists to protect the American people from officials who abuse their power, who betray them. It exists for a case just like this one. Honestly, it is hard to imagine a clearer example of how a president could abuse his office, inciting violence against a co-equal branch of government while seeking to remain in power after losing an election.
Caitlin Huey-Burns, Sullivan, and Eli Stokols join me now. Caitlin is CBSN's political reporter with us from Capitol Hill. Sean is a CBSN political contributor and White House reporter for The Washington Post. And Eli is a White House reporter for the Los Angeles Times. Welcome. It's good to have you all. Caitlin, let me start with you. You know, it was a day full of constitutional law arguments. But one of the most striking moments was really at the very top, I thought, where there was sort of this video montage presentation by the House impeachment managers of a video that had no narration and basically took people through the events of January 6th and sort of juxtaposed what was happening in a time-sequenced kind of way, both at the White House, where President Trump was speaking to supporters, and then showing the events through the afternoon at the Capitol itself. We know at least 5 people lost their lives in the wake of this attack. Tell us what it was like, Caitlin, when lawmakers were presented with the retelling of that deadly day.
That's right. Well, that video, 13 minutes in length, was really the theory of the case for Democrats. They wanted to remind those sitting in that very chamber of the events that happened right here in this building a month ago. That is kind of an eternity in politics. A lot has happened over the past month. We have a new administration now, of course. So this was an important way to kind of remind people exactly what happened happened. And it also shows how different this impeachment trial is from the one last year, because this shows that the events happened in plain view, in real time. People were able to witness them. And so this was a way to remind senators about what exactly happened here at the Capitol and connect them to the president's remarks just earlier that day. Now, given COVID protocols here on Capitol Hill, there is a rotating pool that is covering events inside the Senate chamber. One of them is our colleague Grace Seegers, who was inside for some of these proceedings. And she noted during that time when that video was shown that senators were sitting in their seats and they were watching the video. Remember, because of some COVID protocols, senators had the option not to sit in their seats. They could be up in the gallery or in an adjacent room. And at that moment, they were all watching, according to the reports from inside the room. So there is a question about what kind of impact that will have on those.
And Caitlin, we heard President Trump's defense team repeatedly praise the House impeachment managers. What was the strategy with their arguments?
That's right. From the very beginning, Trump's attorney, Bruce Castor, said that the impeachment managers were brilliant, in his words, said that they made a compelling case. And he referenced that because he said that their mission today was not to argue that what the rioters did was wrong. He said to have attacked the Capitol is repugnant. The loss of life is horrific. You will not hear anyone on this team saying anything but denouncing the violence of the rioters. So they were trying to make clear that they weren't arguing with the actual depiction of the rioters. What they are taking issue with is, first, the president's involvement in it. They say that he is protected by free speech and that his speech, in their words, did not incite these riots. And they're also arguing on the constitutional merits. They say that you cannot impeach a president who is no longer in office. One of his attorneys said presidents are impeachable because they are removable. Former presidents are not. Now, the House managers were reminding the senators and the viewers at home that the impeachment of Trump happened while he was president. It happened while he was president, and this part of the proceeding, the conviction phase, is part of that impeachment process that had already begun while Trump was president.
Well, Sean, the Senate voted 56-44 that the former president is legally subject to impeachment, largely along party lines. So where does the trial head next, and how long are senators expecting it to last?
Well, the next steps from here, Elaine, are that both sides are going to begin to present their cases in more detail. And so we're going to see both sides get up to 16 hours to present their side of this trial. You're going to start to see that tomorrow with the House impeachment managers, the Democrats. And then President Trump, former President Trump's attorneys will have a chance to defend themselves after that. At that point, senators will be allowed to ask questions in this process. And so what we're looking at right now is a process that probably stretches into next week as it stands right now. And I think one of the things we learned from today's proceedings, and Caitlin mentioned this in talking about that video that we saw today, is it's really how emotional this entire situation is for a lot of the participants. I mean, the House impeachment managers that are presenting their case, these are members of Congress who were in the Capitol when this attempted insurrection was happening. The jurors in this trial, the senators, were also in the Capitol while this was happening. We saw some of that emotion spill out today. It was very raw. You know, you saw Congressman Jamie Raskin, one of the impeachment managers, get choked up when he talked about the situation. He talked about a conversation he had with his daughter. So I think what we learned from today is that as this trial proceeds in the coming days, the emotion still very raw in the Capitol. It's only been about a month since this happened. And I think we can expect to see more of that in the coming days as this goes on.
Yeah, that really certainly was one of the powerful moments that we saw as well today. Eli, President Biden appeared publicly once throughout the day for a meeting with business leaders. Let's go ahead and listen to what he had to say when asked about impeachment.
Are you going to watch the trial?
I am not. Look, I told you before, I have a job. My job is to keep people. We've already lost over 450,000 people. We're going to lose a whole lot more if we don't act, and act decisively and quickly. A lot of people, as I said, a lot of children are going to bed hungry. A lot of families are food insecure. They're in trouble. That's my job. The Senate has their job. They're about to begin it. I'm sure they're going to conduct themselves well, and that's all I'm going to have to say about impeachment.
So, Eli, this trial is undoubtedly history in the making, that the first time a president has ever been impeached twice. Why is President Biden staying out of it?
Well, Elaine, I think it's pretty clear that the president does not see much political upside in chirping from the sidelines about the trial as it goes on in the Senate this week. This is a very message-disciplined White House, much more than the last one. And it's not just for political reasons. I mean, practically, they look at the Senate, they see the votes, they see the 45 Republicans locked in who are not going to vote to convict President Trump. The President, Biden, is trying to now create as much space for himself to maneuver in a very tightly divided Congress. And his priority is COVID relief. He knows that is where his administration is going to be judged, and that this is his opportunity to push it through, to talk about it, and to show the country that he's serious about moving forward, that he's not hung up on the fights of last year, on attacking President Trump. I mean, look, the House managers make a pretty clear case, showing the video, talking about the emotions, pointing to the founders' words, and the president is content to leave it to them and to the country to take that in from the Senate. Doesn't believe that people need to hear it from him, and really, there's only downside. I think talking to the people inside the White House, the more the president leans into it, puts pressure on Republicans, shames them about voting to acquit this president when he's trying to advance a serious policy agenda in the midst of concurrent crises in this country when it comes to public health and the economy. And so they are full steam ahead, and everybody is on the same page, from the president to the chief of staff to the press secretary, who in the briefing room today batted away every question about impeachment. They are all on the same page when it comes to selling this American Rescue Plan to the public and continuing to create space by making sure that it's popular in terms of public opinion, even when Republicans don't come on board, because that gives them a case to go out and say, as they have been saying, look, this is a bipartisan plan. It may not have support from Republicans in the Congress, but it has support from people who are registered as Democrats and Republicans across the country.
So, Eli, on COVID relief, the House is working on a batch of legislative proposals to be included in that coronavirus relief bill. What exactly do we know about what this aid package is starting to look like?
Well, this is the period now, as the House takes this bill up, it starts to write the bill and add things into it, take things out of it, that we're starting to get into the nitty-gritty details. And it's going to be a few days, perhaps weeks, until we really see what the final package is going to look like that comes to the House floor for a final vote. But the president, the administration, they have laid down a couple clear markers, and they have said consistently direct relief. The president wants $1,400 checks. He said today that he's okay capping that with people who make $75,000 a year or less. Those will be the recipients of the check. But he wants the check to be $1,400 on top of the $600 that was in the last stimulus bill. Will give these people the $2,000 the Democrats talked about on the campaign trail. Beyond that, money for vaccine distribution, beefing up tests, and money for schools. Those are the three main components. But every time they're asked, will you take other things out of the bill? I know you're aware that President Biden, in the interview that aired on Super Bowl Sunday with your colleague, said that, well, maybe minimum wage has to come out of it, and that's a matter for the parliamentarian to decide. But on the whole, the other measures and things that are in this package, the child tax credit, for instance, they say, look, there's a reason that's in there. This is all important for the economy, and they are not looking to do this piecemeal. So I don't think there's a lot of wiggle room in terms of taking major components out of the piece. The White House more willing to negotiate on the margins in terms of figuring out, how to target the relief checks, where to end unemployment benefits, things like that.
Yeah, that bit about minimum wage was one of the many things that came out of that interview the president did with Norah O'Donnell. Well, Sean, Democrats seem prepared to move on without Republicans for this bill. And we do have some new CBS News polling that shows 3/4 of the country think that bipartisan support for the package is important, but only about 1/3 of Democrats think it's very important. We heard Eli spell out sort of the calculus here for the White House. How do these kinds of numbers factor into the overall administration goals here?
Yeah, that polling you point to, Elaine, sort of speaks to the dilemma that President Biden is facing in the earliest days of his administration. Democrats controlling the White House, controlling the House, and controlling the Senate realize, look, they have the numbers to pass a big COVID relief bill, even if they don't get Republican support. And they've already taken steps to do that. They've already taken steps to use a maneuver known as reconciliation, which would enable them to pass a sweeping bill without any Republican support. But this president is somebody who campaigned over and over again. We heard from him time and again on the campaign trail last year talk about the value of bipartisanship. He talked about what he envisioned as a post-Trump era in which Republicans would be more willing to negotiate and that he would be willing to work with the other side in a way that other candidates could not. And that's what sort of set him apart as a presidential candidate. So he's still banking publicly and rhetorically on bipartisanship. But the reality is, it's not yet clear whether that's going to happen, whether any Republicans are actually going to budge, whether they're going to support where this bill ultimately ends up. And then there's a decision that the president's going to have to make of, is he satisfied with going just with Democrats? It looks right now that the president is satisfied with doing that. It looks like his position is, look, I want Republicans to support this bill. I think they would support it, even if we have to use this reconciliation tactic. But it seems like this White House and the Democratic Party as a whole realizes, look, we've got to pass something. We've got the power. If we don't do anything, if we wait and we draw this out and we constantly try to get, a couple of Republicans on board, that's not a strategy that I think is being widely accepted in the party. It's the opposite, if anything. And so right now, the big political question for Biden looming over this whole thing, not really whether he's going to be able to pass something, but who is actually going to vote for that? Are you going to see somebody like a Senator Susan Collins, like a Senator Mitt Romney, a moderate Republican, get on board with this? If Biden's able to do that, then he sort of puts a stamp on this bill and says, look, this is a bipartisan bill. This is a bill that Democrats and Republicans came together to pass. If he's not able to do that, then we're likely to see a partisan debate over the coming months over how effective this legislation ends up being, where the money goes, and that could become a big issue in the midterm elections as we look to 2022.
Well, we know from previous polling that millions of Americans have been waiting for Washington to do something for quite some time now. All right, Caitlin Huey-Burns, Sean Sullivan, and Eli Stokols, great to have you all. Thank you very much.